The man who promised to marry her took one look and spat at her feet. "I ordered a wife," he said loud enough for the whole platform to hear, "not a walking skeleton." Clara Bennett stood frozen in the Texas cold while 50 strangers watched her humiliation. She had 4 cents in her pocket, no return ticket, and nowhere to go. When the sun set and drunk men started circling, she prayed for death to come quick. Instead, a little girl's voice cut through the darkness. "Papa, why is that lady crying? Can we take her home? Subscribe to my channel and stay until the end. Comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled." Clara Bennett's knees hit the frozen platform before she could stop them. 6 days on a train. 6 days of stale bread and hope. 6 days of whispering his name like a prayer. Howard Finch. Howard Finch. Howard Finch. And believing that somewhere at the end of the line someone was waiting to save her. He wasn't. "Get up." Howard Finch stood over her, his shadow blocking out the pale winter sun. 45 years old, barrel chest, small eyes that had already dismissed her as worthless. Clara struggled to her feet. "Mr. Finch, Don't. Please, if you would just—" "I said don't." He grabbed her chin, turning her face left then right, examining her like livestock. His fingers smelled like tobacco and something sour. "How old are you, Truth?" 19. "You look 15, and starved." He released her with a shove that sent her stumbling backward. "The photograph you sent showed a woman. This." He gestured at her thin frame, her hollow cheeks, her patched coat. "This is a child playing dress-up." "I am not a child." Clara's voice cracked. "I worked 3 years in a textile mill. I can cook, clean, keep books, mend anything you— Can you bear children?" The question hit her like cold water. What? Children. Can you bear them?" Howard stepped closer. "Because looking at those hips, I'd say you'd split in half trying to push out a baby. And I didn't pay good money to ship a barren girl halfway across the country." Someone in the crowd laughed. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. People had gathered now, dozens of them watching the show. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Men smirked. Children pointed. "Please." The word came out as a whisper. "Please, Mr. Finch, I have nowhere else to go. I spent everything on the ticket. Everything. If you'll just give me a chance." Should have thought of that before you lied about what you looked like. "I didn't lie. That photograph was taken 2 years ago. I was fatter, healthier." Howard laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "Well, you ain't neither now, and I ain't spending my life with some skinny orphan who'll be dead before spring." He turned to the crowd and raised his voice. "Let this be a lesson, folks. You order a bride through the mail. Make damn sure she sends an honest picture. This one," he jerked his thumb at Clara, "ain't worth the paper her letters were written on." More laughter. Scattered applause. Clara wanted to disappear. Wanted the platform to open up and swallow her whole. Wanted to be anywhere but here, standing in her threadbare coat, while strangers mocked her existence. "Mr. Finch," she tried one last time. "I'll work without pay. I'll sleep in the barn. Just please, please don't leave me here. I have nothing. I have no one. Not my problem." Howard Finch walked away. His boots crunched on the icy platform, steady and unhurried, and he didn't look back once. The crowd parted for him like water around a stone, then closed again, leaving Clara stranded in a sea of hostile faces. "Well?" A woman's voice dripping with false sympathy. "That's what happens when you reach above your station." Poor thing probably thought she'd hit the jackpot. Texas rancher, comfortable life. Comfortable with Finch, ha? She's better off freezing. Clara didn't move. Couldn't move. Her legs had turned to water. Her chest had turned to stone. And somewhere deep inside her, something small and hopeful was dying. 4 cents. That's what she had left in this world. 4 cents and a carpet bag, and a coat that couldn't keep out the wind, and memories of everyone who'd ever left her behind. Mama coughing blood into a handkerchief telling Clara to be brave. Daddy hanging from the barn rafters, leaving nothing but debts, and a daughter who found his body. And now Howard Finch walking away without a backward glance, taking her last chance at survival with him. The crowd dispersed. Clara sank onto a wooden bench because her legs refused to hold her anymore. The cold seeped through her skirts, into her bones, into her soul. She didn't cry. She was past crying. She just sat there watching the sky darken from gray to charcoal to black, and waited for the cold to finish what Howard Finch had started. The trouble came 3 hours later. Clara had stopped shivering by then, which some distant part of her brain recognized as dangerous. Her fingers had gone from numb to burning to nothing at all. Her thoughts moved like molasses, slow and thick, and increasingly strange. Maybe freezing wasn't such a bad way to go. Better than starving. Better than the alternatives that waited for girls with no money and no prospects in frontier towns. "Evening, sweetheart." Clara's eyes flew open. 3 men stood in front of her bench. She hadn't heard them approach, hadn't heard anything over the wind and her own sluggish heartbeat. They were rough-looking, trail-worn, with the kind of eyes that made her skin crawl. "Go away." Her voice came out slurred, weak. "Now that ain't friendly." The leader stepped closer, tall, scar through his left eyebrow, smile like a knife wound. "We been watching you all evening. Saw what that bastard Finch did. Shame, really. Pretty girl like you left out in the cold." I said go away. Here's the thing. He crouched down to her level, and she smelled whiskey and tobacco and unwashed skin. "You got 2 choices tonight. Come with us, warm up proper, and show your gratitude like a good girl, or stay here and freeze solid. Either way." He reached out and touched her face with one grimy finger. "You ain't lasting till morning." Clara tried to pull away, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Too cold. Too tired, too far gone. "Pretty little thing," one of the other men said. "Bet she's never even been touched." "Virgin mail-order bride." The leader's grin widened. "Don't that beat all? Finch threw away a goddamn prize and didn't even know it." His hand closed around her wrist. "No." Clara tried to struggle. "No, please." "Shh." He hauled her to her feet, and her legs buckled immediately. He caught her, pulled her against him, one arm locked around her waist. "Don't fight, sweetheart. Fighting just makes it more fun for us." Clara opened her mouth to scream. Nothing came out. Her voice had frozen along with everything else. She was going to die out here, or worse, and she couldn't even scream for help. Couldn't even let her go. 3 words. Quiet. Calm, carrying more threat than any shout. The man holding Clara turned, and she turned with him still trapped against his body. A figure stood 10 feet away, haloed by the lamplight spilling from the station house. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a sheepskin coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. In his arms, wrapped in blankets, was a little girl. "Walk away, friend." The leader's grip tightened on Clara's waist. "This ain't your concern." "I'm making it my concern. She's got no claim on nobody. Finch threw her out, which means she's fair game for whoever. She's a human being." The stranger's voice hadn't changed, but something in the air had. A tension, a warning. "And you're going to take your hands off her, or I'm going to remove them for you. Your choice." The little girl in his arms stirred, lifted her head, looked at Clara with eyes the color of a summer sky. "Papa?" Her voice was high and sweet. "Why is that man hurting the lady?" "He's not going to hurt her, Rosie." The stranger's eyes never left the leader's face. "He's going to let her go and walk away. Isn't that right?" A long pause. Clara could hear her own heartbeat hammering. Then the leader laughed and shoved her forward. She fell, knees hitting the platform, palms scraping against ice. "Keep her." He spat near her head. "Skinny little nothing like that ain't worth the fight anyway." The three men melted back into the darkness, their footsteps fading until only the wind remained. Clara stayed on her hands and knees, shaking. She couldn't get up, couldn't remember how. Bootsteps approached, stopped beside her. "Can you stand?" She shook her head. "All right." The stranger set the little girl down carefully on the bench Clara had vacated. "Stay here, Rosie. Don't move." "Yes, Papa." Then hands were under Clara's arms, lifting her with a strength that made her feel weightless. The world tilted, spun, settled. She found herself looking up into a face carved from granite and grief. Gray eyes, hard jaw, several days of stubble. He might have been handsome once before, loss had hollowed out everything soft. "Can you walk?" I don't know." "Try." He steadied her while she found her footing. Her legs wobbled but held, barely. "Good." He shrugged out of his sheepskin coat, a practiced motion quick and efficient, and wrapped it around her shoulders before she could protest. "Keep that on." "But you'll—" "I'll survive." "You won't. Keep it on." Clara pulled the coat tight around herself. It smelled like wood smoke and leather and horse, and it was warm, so warm that tears sprang to her eyes. "Thank you." Her voice broke. "Thank you. I don't even know your name." "Samuel Holloway." He turned to collect his daughter from the bench. "And you're the bride Finch rejected." It wasn't a question. "Yes." Clara swallowed hard. "Clara Bennett." Samuel lifted Rosie back into his arms. The little girl immediately reached toward Clara, her small hand stretching across the space between them. "You're sad," Rosie said. "I can tell 'cause your eyes look like Papa's eyes used to look, before he stopped being so sad all the time." Clara didn't know what to say to that. "Rosie." Samuel's voice was gentle but firm. "But Papa, she's sad. And cold. And those men were mean to her." Rosie's lower lip trembled. "We can't leave her here. You said we never leave people who need help. You said that's what Mama would have wanted." A muscle twitched in Samuel's jaw. "I know what I said." "So we have to help her." Rosie's voice had taken on the particular urgency of a child who knew she was winning an argument. "Please, Papa. Please. She can come home with us and sleep in my room, and I'll share my blankets and—" "Rosie. Please." The silence stretched. Clara held her breath. Then Samuel sighed a sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep and exhausted, and turned to face her. "You got anywhere to go?" "No, sir." "Anyone coming for you?" "No, sir." "Money?" Clara's shame burned hot in her chest. 4 cents. Something flickered in Samuel's gray eyes. Anger, maybe, or recognition. "I've got a ranch 12 miles north," he said finally. "Warm cabin, spare room. You can stay there until you figure out your next move." Clara's throat closed up. "Why, you don't know me. You don't owe me anything." "No, I don't." Samuel looked at her with those frost-colored eyes, and she saw something in them she hadn't expected. Not pity, not charity. Something harder and more honest. "But I buried my wife 3 years ago, and before she died, she made me promise to never walk past someone who needed help. So here I am, not walking past." "Your wife?" Fever took her. His voice was flat. Fast and ugly, and nothing anyone could do. Rosie was too. Clara's heart cracked open. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just—" He gestured toward the edge of the platform where a wagon waited in the darkness. "Get in the wagon before you freeze to death and make this whole conversation pointless." Rosie giggled. Papa made a joke. Papa's tired of standing in the cold. But there was the ghost of warmth in Samuel's voice. "Come on, both of you." He led the way to the wagon and Clara followed because what else could she do? Her options had narrowed to this, a stranger's kindness, or a frozen death. She chose kindness. Samuel helped her up onto the wagon bench, then handed Rosie to her. The little girl immediately snuggled into Clara's lap, her small body radiating heat like a coal stove. "Hold her close," Samuel said, climbing up beside them and taking the reins. "Keep each other warm." "Yes, sir." "And Clara." She looked at him. "Stop calling me sir. Makes me feel like my father." "What should I call you?" "Samuel. Just Samuel." He clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward, and Copper Springs fell away behind them into the darkness and snow. The first mile passed in silence. Rosie dozed against Clara's chest, her small fist curled into the fabric of the sheepskin coat. Clara held her carefully, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid that any wrong motion might shatter this fragile miracle. A stranger had saved her. A child had claimed her. She was riding toward an unknown future with a man she'd met 15 minutes ago. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like waking up. "She likes you." Clara startled at Samuel's voice. He hadn't looked away from the road, but his words were clearly meant for her. "Rosie. She doesn't take to strangers usually. After her mama died, she went months without talking to anyone but me. She seems—" Clara searched for the right word. "Bright. Full of life. She's got her mother's spirit." A pause. "Her mother's stubbornness, too. Once she decides something, there's no talking her out of it." "What did she decide about me?" Samuel's jaw tightened. "That you needed saving." The words hung in the cold air between them. "I did," Clara admitted quietly. "I do. I know." He still wasn't looking at her. "I saw your face on that platform. Saw the way you'd stopped fighting. Another hour you would have let the cold take you." Clara couldn't deny it. Rosie saw something else, though. Samuel's voice dropped. "Don't know what exactly, but she looked at you and she saw something worth saving. So maybe she's right." He finally glanced at her and his gray eyes held a challenge. "You going to prove her right?" Clara thought about her mother's last words. "Be brave." Thought about her father's silence, his abandonment, his choice to leave her behind. Thought about Howard Finch and his cruelty and the laughter of 50 strangers who'd watched her humiliation. Then she thought about a little girl's voice cutting through the darkness. "Why is that lady crying? Can we take her home?" "Yes," Clara said. "I'm going to prove her right." Samuel nodded once, a sharp jerk of his head, and turned his attention back to the road. They didn't speak again for a long while. The ranch appeared through the snow like a promise. Clara saw the cabin first, solid log stone chimney, warm light flickering in the windows. Then the barn, large and sturdy. Then the outbuildings, the fences, the evidence of years of hard work carved into the frozen land. Samuel had built this. She was certain of it. Built it with his own hands, probably while his wife was alive, probably dreaming of children and grandchildren and generations to come. Now it was just him and Rosie, and temporarily, impossibly her. Samuel brought the wagon to a stop near the cabin. "Wait here." He climbed down and disappeared inside. A moment later, the door swung open and lamplight spilled across the snow. "Bring her in." Clara gathered Rosie carefully. The little girl barely stirred and climbed down from the wagon. Her legs had gone stiff during the ride, and she stumbled on the icy ground. Samuel caught her elbow, steadied her, let go the moment she was stable. "Inside. Now." She didn't argue. The warmth hit her like a wave when she stepped through the door. Heat from the fireplace, from the stove, from the simple fact of walls and a roof and shelter from the killing cold. Clara's eyes watered. "Put Rosie in her room." Samuel pointed to a door on the left. "Bed's already turned down. Then come back out. You need to eat." Clara carried the sleeping child into a small bedroom decorated with a child's treasures, a rag doll on the pillow, drawings pinned to the walls, a collection of pretty stones on the windowsill. She laid Rosie down carefully and pulled the quilt up to her chin. The little girl sighed in her sleep, smiled. Clara stood there for a moment watching her breathe. This child had lost her mother, had grown up knowing that the person who was supposed to protect her could be taken away without warning. And yet she'd looked at Clara, a stranger, a reject, a nobody, and seen someone worth saving. "Thank you," Clara whispered. "I won't forget this. I won't let you down." She returned to the main room to find Samuel setting a plate on the table. Bread, cheese, cold ham, a cup of coffee that steamed in the lamplight. "Eat," he said. "Slowly. Your stomach won't thank you if you rush." Clara sat. Ate. The food tasted like heaven, real food after days of stale train provisions, and she had to force herself to take small bites to chew thoroughly, to not devour everything in sight, like the starving animal she'd become. Samuel sat across from her with his own cup of coffee, watching, waiting. "Ask your questions," Clara said finally. "I know you have them. Just one." His gray eyes were steady. "What do you want?" "I don't understand." "Everyone wants something. What do you want?" Clara set down her fork, thought about the question seriously, because this man deserved a serious answer. "I want to not be afraid anymore," she said finally. "I want to earn my keep instead of begging for scraps. I want to work hard and be useful and prove that I'm worth something to someone." That's a lot of wants. I've had a lot of time to think about them. Samuel studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Spare rooms through there." He pointed to a door near the kitchen. "It's small, used to be grain storage, but it's warm and private, and yours for as long as you need it. I'll work for my keep, whatever you need. Cooking, cleaning, mending. We'll figure it out in the morning." He stood. "For now, sleep. You look like you haven't closed your eyes in a week." He was right. The exhaustion was crashing over her now, pulling her down like deep water. "Samuel." He paused at his bedroom door. "Thank you. For everything. I know you didn't have to." "No, I didn't." He looked back at her, and something complicated moved across his face. "But Rosie was right. You needed saving. And maybe I needed someone to save." Before Clara could respond, he was gone, his door closing softly behind him. She sat alone in the quiet cabin, surrounded by warmth and lamplight, and the impossible fact of her survival. Tomorrow would bring new questions, new challenges, new chances to fail or succeed. But tonight she was alive. Tonight she had a roof over her head and food in her belly, and a little girl who'd claimed her without hesitation. Tonight that was enough. Clara made her way to the small spare room, found a narrow bed with a thick quilt, found warmth, found safety. She lay down, closed her eyes. And then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Outside. Slow. Deliberate. Circling the cabin once, twice, 3 times before finally fading into the distance. Through the wall she heard Samuel's bedroom door open, heard his footsteps cross to the window, heard him stand there for a long silent minute. Then his voice low and hard speaking to himself. "Not tonight, Crane. Not ever." Clara's eyes flew open. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Who was Crane? And why did Samuel Holloway sound like a man preparing for war? Clara woke to the sound of a child's laughter. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The ceiling was wrong rough-hewn logs instead of cracked plaster. The smell was wrong wood smoke and coffee instead of factory oil and unwashed bodies. The bed was wrong soft and warm, instead of the thin mattress she'd shared with 3 other girls at the Boston boarding house. Then it all came rushing back. The train. The platform. Howard Finch's cruel words. The men with hungry eyes. Samuel Holloway's steady voice cutting through the darkness. And Rosie. That little girl with sunshine in her smile, asking if they could take her home. Clara sat up slowly. Her body ached in ways she hadn't expected. 6 days on a train followed by hours of cold had left its mark. But she was alive. She was warm. She was safe. For now. She dressed quickly in the same clothes she'd worn yesterday, trying to smooth out the worst of the wrinkles. Her carpet bag sat in the corner where Samuel had placed it last night. 3 dresses, a hairbrush, her mother's Bible, and the letters from Howard Finch that she should probably burn. The laughter came again, followed by a man's voice, low, patient, almost gentle. Clara opened her door and stepped into the main room. Rosie sat at the kitchen table, her golden curls wild from sleep, a cup of milk in front of her. Samuel stood at the stove, his back to Clara, flipping something in a pan. He'd changed into a clean shirt, and his hair was damp, like he'd washed up at the pump. "And then the chicken said to the pig," Rosie was saying, barely containing her giggles, "That's not mud, that's my breakfast." "That doesn't make any sense," Samuel said, but there was warmth in his voice. "It's funny, Papa, if you say so." "It is, Miss Clara. Isn't it funny?" Both of them turned to look at her. Rosie with delight, Samuel with something more guarded. "Good morning," Clara said, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm sorry I didn't mean to sleep so late." "It's barely past dawn." Samuel turned back to the stove. "Sit down. Breakfast is almost ready." Clara sat across from Rosie, who immediately launched into a detailed explanation of her joke, which involved a chicken, a pig, and a series of misunderstandings that Clara couldn't quite follow. But she nodded along anyway, because the little girl's enthusiasm was infectious. Samuel set plates in front of them. Eggs, bacon, thick slices of bread toasted over the fire. More food than Clara had seen in days. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but she forced herself to eat slowly, remembering Samuel's warning from last night. "Miss Clara." "Yes, Rosie." "Are you going to stay with us forever?" Clara's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Rosie?" Samuel's voice was gentle but firm. "We talked about this. Miss Clara is staying with us for a little while until she figures out what she wants to do next." "But why can't she stay forever?" Rosie's lower lip jutted out. "She's nice. She's pretty. She needs a home, and we have a home. It makes sense." "Life doesn't always make sense, sweetheart." "But Papa, eat your breakfast." Rosie subsided into silence, but she kept shooting hopeful glances at Clara throughout the meal. Clara didn't know what to do with those glances. Didn't know what to do with any of this: the warm cabin, the hot food, the gruff man who'd saved her life, and the bright-eyed child who'd claimed her heart. When breakfast was finished, Clara stood immediately and began gathering plates. "You don't have to do that," Samuel said. "I want to." She carried the dishes to the wash basin. "I told you last night I'll earn my keep. Whatever you need done, I'll do it." Samuel studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Rosie, show Miss Clara where we keep the soap for dishes. Then come find me in the barn." "Yes, Papa." He pulled on his coat and hat, pausing at the door to look back at Clara. "I'll be working till midday. Rosie knows the routine. Just—" He seemed to search for words. "Just don't let her talk you into anything foolish. She's got her mother's gift for persuasion." "I'll be careful." He nodded once and was gone. The moment the door closed, Rosie bounced out of her chair and grabbed Clara's hand. Come on. I'll show you everything. The soap is here and the good rags are here, and we have to save the bacon grease because Papa uses it for things. And after dishes, can I show you my chickens? I have my own chickens. Well, they're Papa's chickens really, but he lets me name them and collect the eggs and—" Clara let the flood of words wash over her, finding comfort in the child's chatter. This was normal. This was domestic. This was the kind of life she'd dreamed about during those long nights in the textile mill when her fingers bled from the looms and her back ached from 12-hour shifts. She washed the dishes while Rosie dried them, standing on a small stool to reach the counter. The little girl kept up a constant stream of commentary about her chickens, her dolly, her Papa, the cat in the barn that she wasn't supposed to pet but did anyway. "Her name is Princess," Rosie confided. Papa says naming barn cats is foolish, but I don't care. She's pretty, and she catches mice, and she lets me hold her sometimes. She sounds wonderful. She is. Do you want to meet her? I'd like that very much. Rosie beamed. I knew you'd be nice. I knew it the second I saw you. You looked sad, but the good kind of sad, not the mean kind. Clara paused. There's a good kind of sad. Uh-huh. Rosie nodded seriously. Mean sad is when people are sad, and they want to hurt other people because of it, like Mr. Finch. Papa says he's mean sad because his heart got broken a long time ago, and he never fixed it, so now he breaks other people's hearts instead. Clara thought about Howard Finch, about the cruelty in his eyes, about the way he'd rejected her in front of everyone, humiliating her for the entertainment of strangers. What about good sad? Good sad is when people are sad but they still try to be nice anyway. Rosie reached up and touched Clara's face with one small hand. You're good sad, I can tell. Clara's throat tightened. How can you tell? Because you're crying, but you're not being mean. She hadn't realized she was crying until Rosie said it. Clara wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm... It's okay. Rosie climbed down from her stool and wrapped her small arms around Clara's waist. Papa cried a lot after Mama went to heaven. Sometimes he still does when he thinks I'm asleep. I don't tell him I know because I think it would make him feel bad. Clara hugged the child back, her heart breaking and mending all at once. You're very wise for 5 years old. 4 3/4. My birthday's in spring. Papa says we can have cake. That sounds wonderful. You'll still be here for my birthday, right? Rosie pulled back to look at her, those blue eyes full of hope. You'll stay and have cake with us. Clara opened her mouth to say she didn't know that she couldn't make promises, that everything was uncertain and temporary, and, yes, she heard herself say, I'll stay for your birthday. Rosie's smile could have lit up the darkest night. They finished the dishes together, and then Rosie led Clara on a tour of the cabin. The little girl showed her where everything was kept, the flour and sugar in the pantry, the extra blankets in the cedar chest, the sewing basket by the fireplace, the small shelf of books that had belonged to Rosie's mother. Papa doesn't like to look at them, Rosie said quietly, touching the spine of a worn volume. They make him too sad. But sometimes I take one and look at the pictures and pretend Mama is reading to me. Clara knelt down to Rosie's level. Would you like me to read to you sometime? I know I'm not your mama, but... Yes. The word came out fierce, immediate. Yes, please. I miss stories. Papa tries, but he always falls asleep in the middle. Then I'll read to you, every night if you want. Promise? Promise. Rosie threw her arms around Clara's neck, nearly knocking her over. Clara caught her, held her, and felt something shift in her chest, a door opening that she'd thought was locked forever. The morning passed quickly. Rosie showed Clara her chickens, 7 hens and 1 rooster, who regarded Clara with deep suspicion, and introduced her to Princess the barn cat, who was indeed beautiful, and did indeed deign to be held, though only for exactly 30 seconds, before squirming away. They collected eggs together, Rosie explaining which hen laid which egg with the seriousness of a professor delivering a lecture. Henrietta's eggs are always speckled. See? And Mabel's are brown but really smooth. And Gertrude doesn't lay as many because she's old, but Papa says we don't eat the old chickens because that wouldn't be nice. Your Papa is a kind man. He's the best Papa in the whole world. Rosie said it like a simple fact. He was sad for a long time after Mama died. Really, really sad. Sometimes I worried he'd forget how to be happy. But then you came. Clara's hands stilled on the egg basket. Rosie, I only got here last night. I know, but Papa smiled this morning, at breakfast. Did you see? Clara tried to remember. Samuel's face when he'd flipped the eggs, the way his mouth had curved just slightly at Rosie's ridiculous joke. I think I did. He hasn't smiled at breakfast in forever. Rosie's voice dropped to a whisper. I think maybe you're magic. Clara laughed a real laugh, the first one in longer than she could remember. I'm not magic, sweetheart. I'm just... She stopped. What was she, a reject? A burden? A woman with nothing to offer but willing hands and a desperate heart. You're just what? I'm just someone who needed help, Clara said finally. And your papa was kind enough to give it. Rosie nodded, as if this made perfect sense. That's what Papa does. He helps people. Even when it's hard. Even when other people are mean to him because of it. Something in her tone made Clara's stomach tighten. What do you mean, who's mean to him? Rosie's face clouded. Mr. Crane. He's mean. He wants to buy our ranch, but Papa won't sell, so, Mr. Crane tries to make things hard for us. Last summer, She stopped abruptly. I'm not supposed to talk about Mr. Crane. Clara knelt down. Rosie, who is Mr. Crane? I can't say. Papa told me not to. Why? Because he says it's grown-up business, and I shouldn't worry about grown-up things. Rosie kicked at the ground. But I do worry, because Mr. Crane is scary, and he has mean eyes, and sometimes he rides by our house at night, and Papa gets real quiet and checks his gun. Clara's blood ran cold. Last night, the hoofbeats circling the cabin. Samuel's voice hard as iron. Not tonight, Crane. Not ever. Rosie has Mr. Crane ever. There you two are. Clara spun around. Samuel stood in the barn doorway, his expression unreadable as always. Papa. Rosie ran to him. I showed Miss Clara the chickens and the cat, and she's going to read me stories every night, and she promised to stay for my birthday. Did she now? Samuel's eyes met Clara's over his daughter's head. That's a lot of promises for one morning. Clara stood suddenly unsure. I didn't mean to overstep. If you'd rather I didn't... It's fine. Samuel lifted Rosie onto his hip. As long as you mean to keep them. I do. I will. He studied her for a long moment, that gray gaze weighing and measuring. Then he nodded. Rosie, go wash up for lunch. I need to talk to Miss Clara. But Papa... Go. Rosie sighed dramatically, but obeyed, sliding down from his arms and trudging toward the cabin with the exaggerated reluctance of a child who knew better than to argue. When she was gone, Samuel turned to Clara. I heard what she told you, about Crane. Clara's heart hammered. I didn't mean to pry. She just started talking and... I know, she does that. Samuel pulled off his hat, ran a hand through his hair. Virgil Crane owns the biggest spread in the territory. He's been trying to buy me out since before Rachel died. Doesn't like that I won't sell. Why does he want your land so badly? Water rights. Creek that runs through my property feeds half the valley. Whoever controls it controls the whole region. Samuel's jaw tightened. Crane's used to getting what he wants. Doesn't take kindly to being told no. What has he done? Cut my fences, spooked my cattle, tried to undercut me with the buyers in town. Samuel's voice was flat, reciting facts. Last fall, my barn caught fire. No proof it was him, but we both know the truth. Clara thought about the charred remains she'd seen at the edge of the property this morning, which she'd assumed were old debris. He burned your barn. Tried to. I got it out before it spread, but I lost 2 months' worth of hay. Samuel met her eyes. That's the man who was riding around my cabin last night. And that's why I need you to understand something. What? Staying here isn't safe. The words were blunt, unflinching. Crane knows I took you in. By now, half the town knows. He'll use that. Use you. Try to hurt me through you if he gets the chance. Clara thought about the 3 men on the platform, about their hungry eyes and grabbing hands, about all the ways the world could hurt a woman alone. I've survived worse than a man who wants someone else's land, she said quietly. Maybe. But Crane isn't just some rancher with a grudge. He's got money influence men who do his bidding without asking questions. He's patient, and he's smart, and he doesn't give up, Are you telling me to leave? Samuel was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I'm telling you what you'd be staying for, what you'd be risking. If you want to leave, find somewhere safer, I'll give you money for a train ticket, help you get set up somewhere else. No judgment. Clara looked at the cabin, at the barn with its handful of animals, at the frozen fields waiting for spring. She thought about Rosie's smile, about the way the little girl had grabbed her hand and claimed her without hesitation, about the promise of stories every night and cake on a birthday still months away. Then she thought about her mother's last words. Be brave. I'm staying, Clara said. Samuel's eyes widened slightly. You understand what I just told you. I understand that you've been fighting alone for 3 years. I understand that your daughter is desperate for someone to read her stories. I understand that this place, she gestured at the ranch, the land, the life he'd built, is worth protecting. And you want to be part of that fight. I want to earn my place. Clara lifted her chin. You gave me shelter when I had nothing. Let me help you keep it. For a long moment, Samuel just stared at her. Then something shifted in his face. Surprise maybe, or respect, and he nodded slowly. All right. You want to help, you can start by learning how this ranch works. I'll teach you what I can when I can. Rosie will fill in the gaps. A pause. But Clara, yes. If Crane comes here, if anyone comes here who feels wrong, you take Rosie and you hide. There's a root cellar behind the cabin entrance is hidden by the woodpile. You don't come out until I come get you. Understood. The reality of what she'd agreed to hit Clara like a cold wind. Understood. Good. Samuel put his hat back on. Now let's go have lunch. Rosie's probably already eaten half the bread loaf waiting for us. He walked toward the cabin, and Clara followed, her heart still racing, but her resolve firm. She'd come to Texas to be a mail-order bride. She'd been rejected, humiliated, left to die. And now she was choosing to stay in a place where danger circled like wolves in winter, where a grieving man kept his gun close and his daughter closer, where nothing was certain except the work that waited each morning. It wasn't the life she'd planned. But maybe, just maybe, it was the life she was meant for. Lunch was simple bread, cheese, more of the ham from breakfast, but it felt like a feast to Clara. She sat at the rough wooden table with Samuel and Rosie, listening to the little girl chatter about the chickens and the cat and the snow that was supposed to come tomorrow. Big storm, Papa says. We might be stuck inside for days and days. That sounds cozy, Clara said. It is. We make popcorn and Papa tells stories and sometimes we play cards, but Papa always wins because he's sneaky. I'm not sneaky. Samuel's voice was mild. I'm strategic. Same thing. Rosie stuck out her tongue and Samuel's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. Clara watched the exchange with something like wonder. This was what family looked like. This was what she'd been searching for, what she'd sold everything to find. Not a stranger's obligation. Not a transaction. Just this. Two people who loved each other making space for a third. After lunch, Samuel announced that he was going to check the fence line before the storm hit. He'd be gone several hours. Clara, you're in charge. Rosie, behave. I always behave. You put a frog in my boot last week. That was an accident. The frog walked into my boot by accident. Maybe he was cold. Samuel sighed, but his eyes were soft. Be good, both of you. He left and Clara found herself alone with Rosie in the warm cabin while the wind picked up outside. Can we bake something? Rosie asked, bouncing on her toes. Mama used to bake when storms were coming. She said sweet things make scary weather less scary. Clara thought about her own limited baking skills, the burned stews and flat breads of her past, the disasters that had earned her mockery in the boarding house kitchen. But Rosie was looking at her with such hope. What did your mama like to bake? Sugar cookies with shapes. She had cutters shaped like stars and hearts and one shaped like a horse, but we lost that one. Rosie tugged Clara toward the pantry. We have flour and sugar and eggs from Henrietta and butter from when Papa traded with the Millers last week. Can we, please? Clara took a deep breath. Show me where everything is. Rosie pulled out ingredients with the confidence of a child who'd done this before. Flour, sugar, butter, eggs. A small jar of vanilla extract that smelled like heaven when Clara unscrewed the lid. Mama's recipe is in her book. Rosie ran to the shelf of books and pulled down a worn volume, not a novel, but a handwritten collection of recipes in careful feminine script. See Sugar Cookies, page 12. Clara opened the book with gentle hands. The pages were spotted with grease and flour, evidence of years of use. The handwriting was neat, but not formal, the letters slanting slightly to the right. This had been Rachel Holloway's book. Rachel Holloway's recipes. Rachel Holloway's kitchen. And now Clara was standing in it about to bake cookies with Rachel Holloway's daughter. Miss Clara. Rosie tugged at her sleeve. Are you okay? Clara blinked. Yes, I'm fine. I was just thinking about your mama. She was nice. The nicest mama in the whole world. Rosie's voice was matter-of-fact. Papa says I have her smile. You do. I can tell. Rosie beamed. And yes, it was Rachel's smile, or what Clara imagined Rachel's smile must have looked like. Full of light. Full of life. They baked together for the next 2 hours. Clara read the recipe aloud, while Rosie measured ingredients with more enthusiasm than precision. Flour ended up on the floor on the counter in Rosie's hair. Butter got smeared across the table. An egg dropped and splattered, making both of them shriek and then dissolve into giggles. It was a disaster. It was perfect. When Samuel came home at dusk, the cabin smelled like sugar and vanilla. A plate of cookies sat on the table. Lopsided stars and misshapen hearts, golden brown and slightly crispy at the edges. Rosie launched herself at him before he'd even gotten his coat off. Papa! We made cookies, Miss Clara helped, but I did most of the work because she didn't know how to use the cookie cutters, and I had to show her. Samuel's eyes found Clara's over his daughter's head. Something passed between them, surprise maybe, or gratitude, and his expression softened in a way she hadn't seen before. You baked cookies. Rosie did most of the work, Clara said quickly. I just followed the recipe. Mama's recipe, Rosie added, from her book. Miss Clara was very careful with it. Samuel set Rosie down and crossed to the table. He picked up one of the lopsided star cookies and examined it for a moment. Then he bit into it. Clara held her breath. Good, Samuel said finally. Real good. Rosie squealed with delight. Clara let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Miss Clara's a good baker, Rosie declared. She's going to teach me everything, and then I'll be the best baker in Texas, and we'll open a store and sell cookies to everyone and get rich. That's quite a plan. I know, I thought of it myself. They ate dinner together, more ham, some vegetables that Samuel had stored in the root cellar, fresh bread that Clara had found in the pantry. Rosie kept up her usual stream of chatter, but Clara noticed Samuel watching her more than usual. Not suspicious. Just curious. Like he was trying to figure something out. After dinner, Clara did the dishes while Samuel put Rosie to bed. She could hear his low voice through the thin walls answering questions and deflecting requests for, just one more story, Papa, please. When he emerged 20 minutes later, Rosie was asleep and the dishes were done. Samuel sat down at the table and looked at Clara. Thank you, he said. For the cookies, for keeping her company. She kept me company. She's a wonderful child. She is. Samuel was quiet for a moment. She hasn't laughed like that since her mother died. Not really. She's been happy, but today she was herself again. Clara didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. Rachel used to bake with her, Samuel continued. Every storm. It was their thing. After Rachel died, I tried to keep it going, but... He shook his head. I'm not a baker. Burned everything I touched. Eventually, Rosie stopped asking. She asked me today. I think she's been waiting for someone to ask. Maybe. Samuel's gray eyes held hers. Or maybe she was waiting for you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning Clara wasn't ready to examine. I should sleep, she said, standing. The storm's coming, and you said there would be work to do. There will be. Samuel stood too. Clara. She paused at her door. You did good today. Better than good. It was the first real compliment he'd given her. The first acknowledgement that she was more than a burden he'd taken in out of obligation. Thank you, she said, for giving me the chance. She went to her small room and closed the door. Outside, the wind was picking up, whistling around the corners of the cabin. The storm was coming. Clara lay down on her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. She thought about Rosie's laughter, about Samuel's almost smile, about cookies shaped like stars and a dead woman's recipe book, and the strange feeling of belonging somewhere for the first time in years. She thought about Virgil Crane, circling the property like a predator waiting for weakness. She thought about the promises she'd made to stay, to help to read stories, and bake cookies, and be there for a little girl's birthday. And she thought about her mother's last words, whispered through cracked lips as the fever took her. Be brave, Clara. Promise me you'll be brave. I'm trying, Mama, she thought. I'm trying. The storm hit sometime after midnight. Clara woke to the sound of wind screaming around the cabin and snow pelting the windows like thrown gravel. The temperature had dropped. She could feel it even under her thick quilt. She got up to check the fire. Samuel was already there, feeding logs into the stove, his movements practiced and efficient. Couldn't sleep either, he asked without turning around. The wind woke me. It'll be like this for a day, maybe two. We'll be snowed in by morning. Clara moved to stand beside him, watching the flames catch. Is that dangerous? Only if we run out of wood, which we won't. He closed the stove door. I've been through worse. They stood there in the flickering light, not speaking. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the cabin was warm and safe, a small island in a sea of white chaos. You should go back to sleep, Samuel said finally. Long day tomorrow. Clara nodded, but didn't move. There was something she needed to say. Something that had been building since Rosie told her about the cookies and the recipes, and the mother who wasn't there anymore. Samuel. He looked at her. I know I'm not Rachel. The words came out quiet, but steady. I know I can never replace her for you or for Rosie. But I want you to know that I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to be useful, to earn my place. That's all. Samuel was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I know. I don't want you to think. I don't. He turned to face her fully. Rachel was my wife, the mother of my child. I loved her more than I knew it was possible to love someone. And when she died, I thought I'd never feel anything again. Clara's heart clenched. But Rosie needs more than a father who's just going through the motions. She needs laughter and cookies and stories at bedtime. She needs someone who sees her, really sees her, and makes her feel like she matters. She does matter. I know, but sometimes I forget to show her. Samuel's jaw tightened. You've been here one day and already she's happier than she's been in months. That's not replacing Rachel. That's something else entirely. Clara didn't know what to say. Didn't know what any of this meant for her, for Samuel, for the fragile thing growing between them. Go to sleep, Samuel said again, but his voice was gentler now. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Clara nodded and went back to her room. But sleep was a long time coming. She lay awake listening to the storm, thinking about a man who'd built a life and lost it, and was slowly, painfully learning to build again. Thinking about a little girl who'd lost her mother but hadn't lost hope. Thinking about her own battered heart, which had been broken so many times she'd stopped believing it could heal. Maybe that was the thing about storms, she thought. They were terrifying while they lasted, but eventually they passed, and when they did, the world was clean and new, waiting for whatever came next. Clara closed her eyes and let the sound of the wind carry her into dreams. When she woke, the storm had buried the world in white. And somewhere in the silence, a new kind of life was waiting to begin. The snow had piled halfway up the cabin door by the time Clara woke. She heard Samuel before she saw him, the scrape of a shovel, the thud of snow being tossed aside the low curse when the wind threw it right back. Clara dressed quickly and pushed open her door to find Rosie already at the window, her nose pressed to the frost-covered glass. "We're buried," Rosie announced with the delight only a child could find in disaster. "Papa's digging us out, but the snow keeps falling and he looks like a snowman already." Clara crossed to the window and looked out. Samuel was indeed covered in white, his hat and shoulders and beard all frosted over as he fought to clear a path to the barn. The animals would need tending storm or no storm. "I should help him." "Papa says you should stay inside where it's warm." Rosie tugged at Clara's hand. "He said you don't have proper boots yet, and you'll catch your death if you go out there." Clara looked down at her thin, button-up boots, the ones that had been laughably inadequate since the moment she'd stepped off the train. Samuel was right. She'd be useless out there, worse than useless, a liability. But she could do something else. "Then let's make sure he has something hot waiting when he comes back in. Can you show me how to make coffee the way your papa likes it?" Rosie's face lit up. "Strong enough to melt a horseshoe. That's what he always says." They worked together in the warm kitchen while the storm raged outside. Clara learned that Samuel took his coffee black and scalding, that he preferred bacon crispy rather than soft, that he'd eat anything she put in front of him, but secretly loved biscuits more than bread. "Mama used to make biscuits every Sunday," Rosie said, standing on her stool to peer into the mixing bowl. "Papa tried to make them after she died, but they came out like rocks. We used one to prop up the wobbly table leg for a while." Clara laughed despite herself. "That bad?" "Worse. Even Princess wouldn't eat them, and she eats mice." The door burst open in a swirl of snow and cold air. Samuel stumbled and covered head to toe in white, his breath coming in great foggy clouds. He slammed the door behind him and stood there dripping onto the floor. "Lord Almighty!" His voice was hoarse from the cold. "Haven't seen a storm like this in 5 years." "Papa, you're making a puddle." "I noticed." He shrugged off his coat and hung it by the fire. "Animals are fed and watered. Should be good till tomorrow if this keeps up." Clara poured him a cup of coffee and held it out. "Here, warm up." Samuel took the cup, and their fingers brushed. His hands were red and raw from the cold, but he didn't seem to notice. He just looked at her, then at the kitchen behind her, where breakfast was laid out and waiting. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to." Clara stepped back, suddenly self-conscious. "Rosie helped. She showed me how you like things." Samuel's eyes moved to his daughter, who was practically vibrating with pride on her stool. Something soft crossed his face. "Did she now?" "I'm a good helper," Rosie declared. "Miss Clara said so." "I'm sure you are." Samuel sat down at the table and wrapped his frozen hands around the coffee cup. "This is good, strong." "Strong enough to melt a horseshoe?" Rosie asked hopefully. "Just about." They ate breakfast together while the wind howled outside. Samuel was quieter than usual, his eyes distant, and Clara wondered if he was thinking about other storms, other breakfasts, a different woman sitting in her chair. She didn't ask. Some questions weren't hers to ask yet. After breakfast, Samuel checked and rechecked the windows and doors, making sure nothing had come loose in the night. Rosie trailed after him, asking questions about every crack and draft, until he finally scooped her up and deposited her on the rug by the fire. "Stay here. Play with your dolly. Let Papa think." "What are you thinking about? Grown-up things." "Like what?" Like how to keep nosy little girls occupied during a 3-day storm. Rosie giggled and grabbed her doll, immediately launching into an elaborate conversation about the weather and the chickens, and whether Princess was warm enough in the barn. Clara watched Samuel move around the cabin, checking supplies, making mental calculations. He was worried she could see it in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. But not about the storm. "The animals will be fine," she said quietly, when he passed near her. "You said so yourself. It's not the animals I'm worried about." "Then what?" Samuel glanced at Rosie to make sure she wasn't listening, then lowered his voice. "Crane. Storm like this, people get desperate. Start thinking about what they can take while no one's watching." "You think he'd try something in this weather?" "I think he'd try something in any weather if he thought he could get away with it." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Last winter he waited till a blizzard hit, then drove off 20 head of my cattle. By the time I found them, they were mixed in with his herd, and he claimed they'd always been his." "That's theft." "Try proving it. His word against mine, and he's got the sheriff in his pocket." Samuel shook his head. "I've been fighting this battle for 3 years. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it." "It's your home. It's land, dirt and grass and buildings that'll rot eventually." He looked at Rosie, still chattering away to her doll. "She's the only thing that matters. Everything else is just stuff." Clara thought about that, about what mattered and what didn't, about the carpet bag in her room with its 3 dresses and broken hairbrush and letters from a man who'd thrown her away like garbage. "Then why not sell?" she asked. "Take the money, start over somewhere else." Samuel was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Because Rachel's buried here, behind the barn under the big oak tree. Rosie visits her every Sunday, rain or shine." He swallowed hard. "I sell this land, I sell her grave. And I won't do that. Not ever." Clara's heart cracked open. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have asked." "You didn't know." Samuel turned away, but not before she saw the pain in his eyes. "I'll be in the back room if you need me. Got harnesses that need mending." He disappeared through a door she hadn't noticed before, and Clara was left standing in the kitchen with questions she didn't dare ask, and feelings she didn't know how to name. The storm raged for 2 days. Clara had never known time could move so slowly. In Boston, even the worst winters had been full of noise and activity, factory bells and cartwheels, and the constant press of bodies in crowded streets. Here there was nothing but wind and snow and the small sounds of 3 people trying to fill the silence. She read to Rosie from Rachel's books, fairy tales and adventure stories, and a collection of poems that made the little girl's eyes droop with sleepiness. She baked more cookies and then attempted biscuits, which came out better than Samuel's rocks, but not by much. She mended clothes from the basket by the fire, her needle moving in and out of worn fabric while Rosie played at her feet. Samuel came and went, checking on the animals, reinforcing the door, when the wind threatened to tear it off its hinges, sitting by the fire in the evenings, with a quietness that felt less like coldness now, and more like comfort. On the second night, Rosie fell asleep early, worn out from a day of cabin fever, and invented games. Samuel carried her to bed while Clara cleaned up the dinner dishes, and when he came back, he didn't retreat to his room like usual. Instead, he sat down at the table across from her. "Coffee?" Clara nodded, and he poured 2 cups from the pot she'd kept warm on the stove. They sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee and listening to the wind. It had died down, some still fierce, but no longer screaming. The worst of the storm was passing. "Tell me about Boston," Samuel said finally. Clara blinked. "What? You said you worked in a textile mill. What was that like?" She didn't know why he was asking, didn't know why he cared, but he was looking at her with those gray eyes, and she found herself answering. "Long hours. 12, 14 a day sometimes. The air was full of cotton dust, made your lungs burn, made you cough so hard you'd see stars." She wrapped her hands around her cup. "The girls I worked with, we'd joke about it. Call it cotton lung. Like if we named it, we could control it." "Did anyone?" "Die, yes. 3 girls in the 2 years I was there. One was my age. Her name was Mary. She coughed blood for weeks before she stopped coughing altogether. Clara's voice was steady, but her hands weren't. They replaced her the next day, didn't even send flowers to her funeral. Samuel was quiet for a moment. That why you left? The mill closed. Owner's son decided the building was worth more as something else. They gave us an hour to collect our things and get out. Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. Funny thing is, I was relieved. I was so tired of being afraid every time I coughed. Tired of watching girls disappear and wondering if I'd be next. So you answered the advertisement. For a mail-order bride. I answered because I had no other choice. No family, no savings, no skills that mattered outside the mill. Clara met his eyes. I thought being some stranger's wife had to be better than dying in a factory. Or worse. Worse. She hesitated. There were things she hadn't told anyone, things she'd barely admitted to herself. There are men in Boston who prey on girls like me. Factory girls, orphan girls, girls with no one to protect them. They promise work, and then... She stopped. It doesn't matter. I got out before anything happened. But I knew girls who didn't. Samuel's expression had gone hard. I'm sorry. Why? You didn't do anything. No. But someone should have protected you. All of you. His hands tightened around his cup. This world is cruel to women, crueler than it has any right to be. It's cruel to everyone, just differently. Maybe. He was quiet again, studying her face like he was looking for something. You've had a hard life, Clara Bennett. No harder than most. That's not the comfort you think it is. She almost smiled. I know. The wind gusted outside, rattling the windows, and Clara shivered despite the fire's warmth. Samuel noticed. You cold? A little. He got up without a word and retrieved a blanket from the chest by the wall. He didn't hand it to her, just draped it over her shoulders, his hands lingering for just a moment before he pulled away. Better. Yes. Thank you. They went back to their coffee, but something had shifted between them. Clara could feel it, a warmth that had nothing to do with the blanket, a connection that hadn't been there before. Can I ask you something? She said. Depends on what it is. Rosie, she told me about how you stopped smiling after Rachel died, how she worried you'd forget how to be happy. Samuel's jaw tightened. She talks too much. She loves you. She sees more than you think. I know she does. That's what scares me. He set down his cup. I tried after Rachel, tried to be enough for her. But some days I could barely get out of bed, let alone be a good father. I just went through the motions, did what needed doing, kept us alive. That's not nothing, Samuel. It's not enough either. His voice cracked just slightly. She deserves more. A real home. A mother who can teach her things I can't. A father who doesn't flinch every time he looks at his wife's grave. Clara reached across the table and touched his hand. It was an impulse, she didn't plan it, but once she'd done it, she couldn't take it back. Samuel went still. You're a good father, Clara said quietly. The best I've ever seen. Rosie knows that, even if you don't. He looked at her hand on his, looked at her face. Something moved in his eyes, something raw and hungry and terrified all at once. Clara, you don't have to say anything. She pulled her hand back, her cheeks flushing. I just wanted you to know. Samuel stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. I should check the animals, make sure the barn door hasn't come loose. Samuel, it's the middle of the night. I need to check. He grabbed his coat and was gone before she could say another word, disappearing into the storm like a man fleeing from something far more dangerous than wind and snow. Clara sat alone at the table, her heart pounding, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake. The storm broke on the third morning. Clara woke to silence, Real silence, not just a pause between gusts. She lay in her narrow bed and listened to the nothing, and for a moment she thought she'd gone deaf. Then she heard Rosie's shriek of joy from the main room. "Papa, the sun! The sun is out!" Clara dressed quickly and emerged to find Rosie pressed against the window, staring at a world transformed. The snow was piled in great drifts, glittering like diamonds under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Everything was clean and white and new. Samuel stood by the stove making coffee. He didn't look at Clara when she entered. "Storms past," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'll dig out the path to the barn after breakfast. Animals are probably half crazy by now." "Can I help?" "You've got no boots." "I'll wrap my feet in rags. I've done it before." He finally looked at her, and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. He hadn't slept, probably hadn't slept since he'd fled the cabin last night. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath his eyes, and his jaw was shadowed with stubble. "Clara, you don't have to explain." She kept her voice steady, even though her heart was racing. "Whatever happened last night, whatever I said that made you uncomfortable, I'm sorry. It won't happen again." "That's not—" He stopped, rubbed his face with both hands. "Hell." "Papa said a bad word," Rosie announced from the window. "Papa's sorry." Samuel dropped his hands. "Clara, I didn't leave because you made me uncomfortable. I left because—" He trailed off, staring at her with those gray eyes that held too many secrets. "Because what?" "Because I wanted to stay." The words came out rough, almost angry. "Because when you touched my hand, I felt something I haven't felt in 3 years, and that scared the hell out of me." Clara's breath caught. "So I ran." Samuel's laugh was bitter. "Like a damn coward. Spent the whole night in the barn freezing my ass off and trying to convince myself that I imagined it." "Did you imagine it?" "No." He took a step toward her. "I didn't imagine a damn thing." The air between them crackled with something electric. Clara couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stand there staring at this man who'd saved her life and given her shelter and was now looking at her like she was something precious and terrifying all at once. "Papa," Rosie's voice cut through the tension. "Can we go outside now? I want to make snow angels." Samuel closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the intensity was gone, replaced by the careful neutrality she'd come to recognize. "After breakfast, sweetheart. And only if you wear every piece of warm clothing you own." "Yay!" Rosie bounced away to get dressed, leaving Clara and Samuel alone in a silence that felt different now. Charged. Waiting. "We should talk," Samuel said quietly. "Later, after Rosie's in bed." "Okay." I'm not good at this, Clara. Haven't been good at anything except ranching and raising a child since Rachel died. So if I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, you won't." "You don't know that." "No," Clara agreed, "but I'm willing to find out." Something flickered across his face, hope, maybe, or fear. Then Rosie came barreling back into the room, bundled up in so many layers she could barely move, and the moment was over. They spent the morning digging out. Clara wrapped her feet in rags and Samuel's spare wool socks, which were comically large but warm enough. She worked alongside him, shoveling snow and spreading hay for the animals and doing whatever needed doing. It felt good, real, like she was finally earning her place instead of just borrowing space. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors. Clara was in the kitchen starting on a pot of stew when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Multiple horses moving fast despite the deep snow. Samuel was at the window before she could speak, his hand already on the rifle that hung by the door. "Get Rosie," he said, his voice low and hard. "Take her to the root cellar. Now." "Samuel." "Now, Clara." She didn't argue. She found Rosie in the back room playing with her doll and scooped her up without explanation. "Miss Clara, what's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart. We're just going to play a hiding game." "What kind of hiding game?" Clara carried her through the kitchen, out the back door, and around to the woodpile Samuel had shown her. The root cellar entrance was hidden beneath a snow-covered tarp. She pulled it back and lifted the heavy door. "We're going to hide down here and be very, very quiet. Can you do that for me?" Rosie's eyes had gone wide. She wasn't stupid. She knew this wasn't a game. "Is it Mr. Crane?" Clara's blood ran cold. "I don't know, sweetheart, but your papa wants us to be safe, so we're going to do what he says. Okay." Rosie nodded, her lower lip trembling. Clara climbed down into the dark cellar, helping Rosie navigate the ladder. It was cold down here, colder than the cabin, and it smelled like dirt and potatoes and fear. She pulled the door closed above them and gathered Rosie into her arms. "It's dark," Rosie whispered. "I know, but I've got you. Nothing's going to hurt you. Promise." Clara thought about the men on the platform, about the hunger in their eyes, about all the things that could happen to women and children in a world where men like Virgil Crane held power. "Promise," she said, and prayed it wasn't a lie. They waited in the darkness, Rosie's small body trembling against Clara's chest. Above them, muffled by dirt and wood, came the sound of voices. Men's voices, loud, aggressive, demanding. Then Samuel's voice, calm and steady. Clara couldn't make out the words, but she could hear the tone. Samuel wasn't backing down. Whatever these men wanted, he wasn't giving it to them. The voices rose. Someone shouted. There was a crash. Something breaking, and Rosie whimpered. "Shh, sweetheart. Stay quiet." "What if they hurt Papa?" Clara didn't have an answer to that. She just held Rosie tighter and listened to the muffled chaos above her heart, hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Then suddenly silence. Clara held her breath, counted the seconds. 10, 20, 30. The root cellar door creaked open. Light flooded in, blinding after the darkness. Clara squinted up her body, tensing, ready to fight if she had to. "It's me." Samuel's face appeared above them, drawn and pale but unharmed. He reached down for Rosie, lifting her out with gentle hands. "Papa." Rosie threw her arms around his neck. "I was so scared." "I know, sweetheart. I know." He held her tight, his eyes closed. "You're safe now. Both of you." Clara climbed out of the cellar on shaking legs. "What happened? Who were they?" Samuel's jaw tightened. "Crane's men, 3 of them, came to make an offer." "What kind of offer?" "The kind that isn't really an offer." He set Rosie down and took Clara's arm, leading her away from the little girl's ears. "He wants the ranch, says he's done waiting, gave me a week to accept his price or..." "Or what?" Samuel's eyes were hard as flint. "He didn't say, didn't have to." Clara looked back at the cabin, at the broken window that one of Crane's men must have smashed. At the life Samuel had built with his own hands, now threatened by a man who thought he could take whatever he wanted. "What are you going to do?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at her, and she saw something she hadn't seen before. Not just determination, not just stubbornness. Fire. "I'm going to fight," he said. "I'm going to fight, and I'm going to win. And Virgil Crane is going to learn that some things can't be bought or bullied or taken." He turned and walked toward the cabin, and Clara followed, her heart full of fear and hope, and something else entirely. Something that felt like the beginning of a war. The week passed like a held breath. Clara watched Samuel work from dawn to dusk, reinforcing fences, checking on the animals, preparing the ranch for a battle that hadn't started yet. He spoke less than usual, ate quickly, and spent his evenings cleaning his rifle with the focused attention of a man who expected to use it. Rosie felt the tension. She'd stopped chattering as much, stopped bouncing around the cabin with her usual energy. Instead, she stayed close to Clara, holding her hand during meals, curling up beside her on the rug, while Clara read stories that neither of them really heard. On the 4th night, Samuel didn't come in for dinner. Clara fed Rosie, put her to bed, and then sat at the kitchen table watching the door. An hour passed. 2. The food she'd kept warm on the stove had gone cold by the time she heard his boots on the porch. He came in slowly, like a man carrying something heavy. His face was drawn, his shoulders slumped, and when he looked at her, she saw something she'd never seen in his eyes before. Defeat. What happened? Samuel sat down heavily at the table. He didn't answer right away, just stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "I went to town," he said finally. "Tried to get help. Talked to the sheriff, the banker, the other ranchers. Asked them to stand with me against Crane. And nobody will." His voice was flat empty. "They're all scared, or bought off, or both. Even the ones who hate Crane won't risk going against him. They've seen what happens to people who do." Clara's stomach dropped. "So we're alone." "We've always been alone. I just didn't want to admit it." Samuel laughed, but there was no humor in it. 3 years I've been fighting this fight. 3 years of cut fences and spooked cattle and barn fires and threats. And for what? So I can keep a piece of land that'll probably get me killed. "It's not just land, Samuel. You said so yourself. Rachel's buried here." "Rachel's dead." The words came out harsh, brutal. "She's dead, and keeping her grave won't bring her back. All it'll do is get me killed too, and then Rosie won't have any parents at all." Clara reached across the table and grabbed his hands. They were cold, calloused, shaking slightly. "Listen to me," she said. "You are not going to die. Rosie is not going to lose you. We are going to find a way through this. How? I've got no money, no allies, no—" "You've got me." Samuel looked up at her, his gray eyes full of pain and something else. Something that looked like hope trying to break through despair. "Clara, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm telling." She squeezed his hands. "I came here with nothing. You gave me shelter, food, a place to belong. You gave me Rosie. I'm not going to stand by and watch Virgil Crane take that away. Not from you and not from me. You barely know this place, barely know us." "I know enough." Clara's voice was fierce. "I know that Rosie needs her father. I know that this ranch is the only home she's ever known. And I know that I'm tired of running from men who think they can take whatever they want." Samuel stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly his fingers tightened around hers. "You're something else, Clara Bennett." "I'm just someone who's done being afraid." They sat there in the quiet kitchen, hands clasped across the table, and Clara felt something shift between them. The wall that Samuel had built around himself, the distance he'd maintained since that night during the storm, it was cracking, crumbling. "I don't know how to do this," Samuel admitted quietly. "Fight someone like Crane. He's got men, money, power. I've got a rifle and a stubborn streak. Then we fight smart. We find his weakness. Everyone has one. And if we can't find it, then we make one." Samuel's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but was close. "You sound like Rachel. She used to say the same thing. If there's no door, make a window. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. Wisest person I ever knew." He paused. "Until now, maybe." Clara's cheeks flushed. "I'm not wise. I'm just too stubborn to give up." "Same thing sometimes." They were still holding hands. Clara realized it at the same moment Samuel did. His eyes dropped to their intertwined fingers, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Samuel let go. "It's late," he said, standing. "We should sleep. Whatever comes next, we'll need our strength." "Samuel." He paused at his bedroom door. "We're going to win this," Clara said. "I don't know how yet, but I know we will." Samuel looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, a sharp jerk of his head, and disappeared into his room. Clara sat alone at the table, her hands still warm from his touch, her heart full of a determination she hadn't known she possessed. Virgil Crane thought he could take this ranch. Thought he could bully a grieving widower into giving up everything he'd built. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Clara was hanging laundry on the line strung across the cabin's main room, too cold outside to dry anything, when she heard a horse approaching. Her heart seized memories of Crane's men flooding back, but before she could grab Rosie and run, Samuel's voice called from outside. "It's all right. She's a friend." Clara went to the door and saw Samuel helping an older woman down from a sturdy mare. The woman was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun, and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same granite as the mountains. "Clara, this is Martha Harrison. She owns the spread about 5 miles east. Martha, this is Clara Bennett." The mail-order bride that wasn't. Martha's eyes swept over Clara with sharp assessment. "Heard about what Finch did. Man's a damn fool." Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. "Don't just stand there, girl. Invite me in. It's colder than a witch's heart out here." They settled at the kitchen table with coffee, Rosie perched on Clara's lap and staring at Martha with wide-eyed fascination. The older woman didn't seem to mind being examined. If anything, she looked amused. "Pretty child," Martha said. "Got her mother's eyes." Samuel's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Now then." Martha set down her cup with a decisive thunk. "I heard what happened with Crane's men. Word travels fast in this valley." "Word travels fast everywhere," Samuel said. "Doesn't mean anyone's willing to do anything about it. Most people are cowards. That's hardly news." Martha fixed him with a sharp look. "But I'm not most people. I've been fighting Virgil Crane since before you were born, boy, and I'll be fighting him long after we're both in the ground." Clara leaned forward. "You'll help us." "I'll do more than help. I'll tell you how to beat him." Martha's smile was thin and cold. "Virgil Crane has one weakness, and it's not his money or his men. It's his son." "Marcus?" Samuel frowned. "What about him?" "Marcus Crane is 23 years old and dumber than a box of rocks. He's also his father's only heir, which means everything Virgil's built depends on that boy not ruining it." Martha paused. "Marcus has been making mistakes. Big ones. The kind that could destroy the Crane name if the right people found out." "What kind of mistakes?" Martha glanced at Rosie, then back at Samuel. "Not for young ears." Samuel nodded. "Rosie, sweetheart, go check on Princess in the barn." "But Papa—" "Now please." Rosie sighed dramatically, but slid off Clara's lap and trudged toward the door. When she was gone, Martha continued. "Marcus Crane has a gambling problem. A bad one. He owes money to some very dangerous people in San Antonio. People his father doesn't know about." Martha's eyes glittered with something like satisfaction. "Virgil thinks his son is learning the family business. In reality, Marcus has been stealing from his father to pay off debts. If Virgil found out, he'd disown him," Samuel finished. "Worse, he'd destroy him. Virgil Crane would rather have no heir than a weak one. It's the only thing he cares about more than land his legacy." Clara's mind was racing. "So if we could prove what Marcus has been doing, Virgil would have bigger problems than your little ranch." Martha nodded. "He'd be too busy saving his empire to worry about water rights." "How do you know all this?" Samuel asked. "Because I make it my business to know." Martha stood. "I've got documents. Records of Marcus's gambling debts, names of the men he owes, dates and amounts he's stolen from his father's accounts. It took me 3 years to gather it all, and I was saving it for the right moment." She looked at Samuel. "I think that moment is now." "Why?" Clara asked. "Why help us?" Martha's face hardened. "Because 15 years ago, Virgil Crane drove my husband to suicide. Ruined his business, destroyed his reputation, took everything we had. By the time he was done, Frank couldn't live with the shame." Her voice didn't waver, but Clara saw the pain beneath the steel. "I rebuilt from nothing, made myself into something Crane couldn't touch, and I swore I'd make him pay for what he did." "Revenge," Samuel said quietly. "Justice." Martha's eyes flashed. "There's a difference." She left an hour later, promising to return with the documents that could save Samuel's ranch or destroy it entirely if they fell into the wrong hands. Clara and Samuel stood in the doorway, watching her ride away into the winter afternoon. "Do you trust her?" Clara asked. "I trust that she hates Crane more than she hates anything else in this world." Samuel's jaw was tight. "Whether that's enough, I don't know." "It's more than we had yesterday." "True." He looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "Thank you for not giving up. I told you, I'm done running." They went back inside where Rosie was waiting, full of questions about the mysterious visitor and why she'd had to leave. Clara distracted her with the promise of cookies, and soon the cabin was full of the familiar chaos of baking and laughter. But underneath the warmth, Clara felt the tension coiling. They had a weapon now, information that could bring down Virgil Crane. The question was whether they could use it before Crane made his final move. The answer came 3 days later. Clara was reading to Rosie by the fire, a story about a princess and a dragon that the little girl had requested 3 times already. Samuel was at the table going over the documents Martha had delivered the day before, pages and pages of evidence that painted a damning picture of Marcus Crane's secrets. The knock at the door made them all freeze. Samuel was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand. He gestured for Clara to take Rosie, and she scooped the child up, backing toward the root cellar entrance. "Who's there?" Samuel called. "Name's Thomas Crane, Virgil's brother." The voice was older, rougher than Clara expected. "I'm alone. Just want to talk." Samuel exchanged a look with Clara. She shook her head slightly. It could be a trap, but he was already moving toward the door. "I'm armed," Samuel said, "and I don't trust anyone named Crane." "Smart man, but if I wanted you dead, I wouldn't knock first." Samuel opened the door, rifle raised. The man on the porch was perhaps 60, with silver hair and a face that bore a family resemblance to what Clara imagined Virgil must look like. Same strong jaw, same sharp cheekbones, but weathered in a different way. Softer, sadder. "May I come in?" Thomas Crane asked. "It's cold, and what I have to say will take some time." Samuel hesitated, then stepped aside. Thomas entered slowly, his hands visible and empty. His eyes swept the cabin, taking in the modest furnishings, the child in Clara's arms, the documents spread across the table. "Martha Harrison's work," he said, nodding at the papers. "She's thorough. I'll give her that." "How do you know about—" Samuel started. "Because I'm the one who gave her half of it." Thomas sat down at the table without being invited. "My brother is a monster, Mr. Holloway. I've known that for 40 years. I've been trying to stop him for almost as long." Clara stepped forward, still holding Rosie. "Why should we believe you?" Thomas looked at her, and she saw exhaustion in his eyes. Decades of it. "Because I'm tired," he said simply. "Tired of watching Virgil destroy people. Tired of cleaning up after Marcus's messes. Tired of being complicit in everything the Crane name represents." He pulled an envelope from his coat and set it on the table. "This is a signed confession. Everything Marcus has done in his own handwriting. I convinced him to write it by telling him I'd help him escape his father's control. Instead, I'm giving it to you." Samuel picked up the envelope but didn't open it. "Why?" "Because 3 years ago I watched my brother's men set fire to your barn. I saw it happen and did nothing." Thomas's voice cracked. "Your wife had just died. Your daughter was barely more than a baby. And my brother tried to burn you out because you wouldn't sell him a piece of land." The cabin went silent. "I should have stopped it," Thomas continued. "Should have done something. Instead, I kept my head down and pretended I didn't see, just like I've been doing my whole life." He looked at Samuel with something like pleading. "I can't undo what Virgil's done, but I can help you end it. That confession combined with Martha's documents, it's enough to destroy my brother. Enough to free everyone he's ever terrorized." Samuel's hands were shaking. Clara could see the rage building in him, the desire to throw this man out, to reject any help that came from Crane blood. But he didn't. "Get out," Samuel said quietly. Thomas nodded and stood. "The confession is yours. Use it however you want." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Sorry for all of it." He left. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Rosie's small voice broke the silence. "Papa, why are you crying?" Clara looked at Samuel and saw that tears were streaming down his face. He didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't care. He just stood there staring at the envelope in his hands, weeping silently for everything he'd lost, and everything that might finally be within reach. Clara set Rosie down and crossed to him. Without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him. He stiffened at first. Then slowly his arms came up around her, and he buried his face in her hair. "It's over," he whispered. "It's finally going to be over." "Yes." Clara held him tighter. "It is." The following days were a blur of activity. Samuel rode to town with the documents and Thomas's confession. He didn't go to the sheriff, they both knew that was pointless, but to the territorial judge who came through once a month, a man named Harrison, who owed no favors to Virgil Crane. Clara stayed at the ranch with Rosie, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy while everything hung in the balance. She baked, she cleaned, she read stories and played games and pretended her heart wasn't in her throat every moment Samuel was gone. He came back 3 days later, his face transformed. "It's done," he said, standing in the doorway with snow in his hair and something like wonder in his eyes. The judge issued warrants for Marcus's arrest. When Virgil tried to interfere, the judge threatened to arrest him too for obstruction. Samuel laughed, a real laugh, full and free. You should have seen his face. First time in his life someone told him no and meant it. Clara's knees went weak with relief. So it's over. Really over. Crane's finished. His son's in jail, his reputation's destroyed, and half the territory is coming forward with stories about what he's done to them over the years. Samuel crossed the room and took her hands. "We won, Clara. We actually won." Rosie came running from the back room, alerted by the commotion. "Papa, you're home." Samuel scooped her up and spun her around, laughing as she shrieked with delight. Clara watched them, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was what happiness looked like. This was what family felt like. This was everything she'd ever wanted. Later that night, after Rosie was asleep and the cabin was quiet, Samuel found Clara sitting by the fire. She was staring into the flames, lost in thought. "Penny for them," he said, sitting down beside her. "I was thinking about what comes next." "What do you mean?" Clara turned to face him. "The threat's gone. Crane's finished. You don't need someone to help you fight anymore." Samuel's expression shifted. "Is that what you think? That you're only here because I needed help?" "I think—" Clara paused, trying to find the right words. "I think I don't know what I am to you, what I'm supposed to be. I came here as a stranger, and then I was— What? A housekeeper, a protector, a friend. Is that what you want to be? A friend?" The question hung in the air between them. "No," Clara whispered. "That's not what I want." Samuel reached out and cupped her face in his hands. His palms were rough, calloused from years of hard work, but his touch was gentle. "Clara Bennett." He said, his voice low and serious. "I have spent 3 years building walls around my heart, telling myself I'd never love anyone again, never need anyone again." He leaned closer. "And then you showed up on that platform, half frozen and completely alone, and every wall I'd built started crumbling." "Samuel, I'm not good at this. Not good at words or feelings or any of it. But I know what I know." His gray eyes held hers. "I know that when I wake up, the first thing I want to see is your face. I know that when Rosie laughs, I look for you to share it. I know that this cabin hasn't felt like home since Rachel died, until you walked through that door." Tears were streaming down Clara's face. She didn't try to stop them. "I love you," Samuel said. "I think I've loved you since the moment you stood up to those men at the train station. Since you refused to be a victim. Since you chose to stay even when staying was dangerous." He paused. "I love you, Clara. And if you'll have me, if you can accept a broken widower with a precocious daughter and a ranch that's barely held together, I want to spend the rest of my life proving it." Clara couldn't speak, could barely breathe. So instead of words, she answered with action. She kissed him. It wasn't gentle, wasn't tentative. It was fierce and desperate and full of everything she'd been holding back, all the fear and hope and longing that had been building since the first moment he'd wrapped his coat around her shoulders and told her she was worth saving. Samuel kissed her back with equal intensity, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer like he was afraid she might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Is that a yes?" Samuel asked, his voice rough. Clara laughed through her tears. "That's a yes. 1,000 times yes." He pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I should warn you," she said. "I still can't make biscuits properly." "I don't care about biscuits. And I might burn the stew sometimes." "I don't care about stew either." Clara smiled. "What do you care about?" Samuel pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You, Rosie. This life we're building together." He pulled back to look at her. "That's all that matters. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. Together. Together." They sat there by the fire, wrapped in each other's arms, while the night deepened around them. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving behind a silence that felt like peace. Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here, the train ride, the rejection, the terror and despair and unexpected salvation. She'd come to Texas expecting one kind of life and found something completely different, something better than she'd ever dared to dream. Clara. Marry me." She pulled back, startled. "What?" Samuel's face was serious, but his eyes were warm. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks. But I also know that life is short and uncertain, and I don't want to waste another day pretending I don't want you by my side forever." "Samuel, You don't have to answer now. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, the question will be waiting." Clara looked at this man who'd saved her life in more ways than one, who'd given her shelter and purpose and a little girl who called her Miss Clara, but might someday call her something more. She thought about her mother's last words. "Be brave." "Yes," she said. Samuel blinked. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want to spend my life with you. Yes to all of it." Clara laughed, giddy and terrified, and happier than she'd ever been. "Ask me again in the morning if you want to make sure. The answer will still be yes." Samuel's face broke into the widest smile she'd ever seen on him. Then he was kissing her again, and she was kissing him back, and somewhere in the back of the cabin, Rosie's voice called out sleepily, "Papa, Miss Clara, why are you making so much noise?" They broke apart laughing. "Go back to sleep, sweetheart," Samuel called. "We'll explain in the morning." "Explain what?" Clara and Samuel looked at each other. "Everything," Clara said. "We'll explain everything." Rosie's reaction the next morning was everything Clara had hoped for and more. "You're going to be my mama, my real mama, forever and ever." Clara knelt down to the little girl's level. "If that's okay with you." Rosie threw her arms around Clara's neck so hard she nearly knocked her over. "It's more than okay. It's the best thing in the whole world. I wished for this every night, and now it's coming true." Samuel watched from the doorway, his coffee cup forgotten in his hand. When Clara looked up at him, she saw his eyes glistening. "Told you she talks too much," he said, but his voice was thick. "She talks exactly the right amount." Clara hugged Rosie tighter. Every single word. The weeks that followed were full of preparations. The circuit preacher would be coming through in a month, and Clara wanted everything to be perfect, or as perfect as life on a Texas ranch could be. Martha Harrison came by with fabric for a wedding dress, refusing to take payment. "Consider it a gift," she said, "for helping me finally beat that bastard Crane." Clara accepted graciously, though she suspected Martha's generosity had less to do with gratitude, and more to do with the older woman's growing fondness for Rosie, who had taken to calling her Aunt Martha, despite no blood relation whatsoever. The news of Samuel's engagement spread through the territory like wildfire. Clara had expected judgment, the rejected mail-order bride marrying the man who'd taken her in. But instead, she found something unexpected. Acceptance. One by one, women from the neighboring ranches came to call. They brought preserves and quilts and advice about managing a household in the harsh Texas climate. They asked Clara about her life in Boston, about her journey west, about how she'd ended up on that platform in the first place. And when she told them hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, they listened without judgment. "Finch is a fool, Mrs. Miller declared during one visit. "Always has been. You're better off without him." "Much better off," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "Samuel Holloway is worth 10 of Howard Finch. 20 maybe." Clara smiled. "I think so too." The women exchanged knowing glances, and Clara felt something shift inside her. For the first time in her life, she belonged somewhere. Not as a burden or an obligation, but as an equal, a neighbor, a friend. Samuel noticed the change in her. "You're different," he said one evening after Rosie had gone to bed. "Lighter, like you're finally letting yourself breathe." "I think I am." Clara leaned against his shoulder. "For so long I was just surviving, running from one disaster to the next, trying to stay ahead of the next catastrophe. I didn't know how to just live. And now I'm learning." She looked up at him. "You're teaching me." Samuel kissed her forehead. "You're teaching yourself. I'm just along for the ride." 2 weeks before the wedding, Clara received a letter. It arrived with the regular mail delivery addressed to Miss Clara Bennett in careful handwriting she didn't recognize. The return address was Boston, a name she didn't know, a street she'd never lived on. She opened it with trembling hands. "Dear Miss Bennett, my name is Margaret Sullivan. I was a friend of your mother's many years ago before she married your father. We lost touch after she moved away, and I only recently learned of her passing. I am deeply sorry for your loss. I am writing because your mother left something with me before her death, a small inheritance from her own mother, which she wanted kept safe for you. It is not a large sum, but it is yours by right. If you send me your current address, I will arrange for the funds to be transferred. I hope this letter finds you well, and that you have found the happiness your mother always wanted for you. Yours truly, Margaret Sullivan." Clara read the letter 3 times before she believed it was real. Samuel. He came running from the barn, alarmed by her tone. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No, I'm—" She thrust the letter at him. "Read this." He read it quickly, his expression shifting from concern to surprise, to something like wonder. "Your mother left you money. She must have hidden it, kept it secret from my father so he couldn't drink it away." Clara's voice cracked. "She was protecting me. Even then, even before she died, she was trying to protect me." Samuel pulled her into his arms. "She knew you'd need it someday. She knew." Clara pressed her face against his chest. She always knew. The inheritance turned out to be $300 a fortune by Clara's standards. She could have used it to leave to start over somewhere else to build a life independent of Samuel and the ranch. Instead, she invested it in chickens. Chickens. Samuel stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "You want to spend your inheritance on chickens?" I want to build something of my own." Clara spread out the plans she'd drawn up, rough sketches of coops and feed schedules and projected egg sales. "The ranch is yours, the cattle are yours, but this could be mine. Something I built with my own hands." Samuel studied the plans for a long moment. Then he smiled. "All right. Show me where you want the coops." They built them together, Clara learning carpentry alongside everything else Samuel was teaching her. Rosie helped by handing them nails and offering constant commentary on which chickens would have which names. "That one will be Henrietta Jr.," she declared, pointing at a Rhode Island red. "And that one will be Princess too, because Princess the cat needs a friend." "I don't think the cat wants a chicken friend," Samuel said. "She doesn't know what she wants. I know better." Clara laughed, and the sound felt natural now, easy, like laughter was something she'd always known how to do rather than something she'd had to relearn. The wedding day arrived with clear skies and crisp air. Clara woke before dawn, too nervous to sleep. She lay in her narrow bed for the last time. She realized and listened to the familiar sounds of the ranch coming alive, roosters crowing, horses stamping. Samuel's footsteps moving through the cabin as he started the coffee. "Miss Clara." Rosie's face appeared in the doorway. "Are you awake?" "I'm awake, sweetheart." Rosie ran and jumped onto the bed, burrowing under the covers. "Today's the day. Today you become my mama for real. For real." Clara hugged her tight. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready forever." Rosie pulled back to look at her seriously. "Miss Clara." "Yes." "Thank you for staying, when you could have left." Clara's throat tightened. "Thank you for asking me to stay. That first night when you asked your papa if I could come home with you, that changed everything." "I know." Rosie smiled. "I'm very smart." "You are. The smartest girl in all of Texas." "In the whole world," Rosie corrected. "In the whole world." Martha Harrison arrived mid-morning to help Clara dress. The gown they'd made together was simple, but beautiful cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar, and cuffs fitted through the bodice and flowing to the floor. "You look lovely," Martha said, stepping back to admire her work. Clara stared at her reflection in the small mirror. The woman looking back at her was a stranger, not the half-starved orphan who'd stepped off the train in Copper Springs, but someone stronger. Someone who'd survived and fought and chosen to stay. Someone who deserved to be happy. "I can't believe this is real," she whispered. "Believe it." Martha squeezed her shoulder. "You've earned every bit of it." The ceremony was held in the cabin just like Clara had wanted. Samuel had pushed back all the furniture to create space, and neighbors had brought winter flowers and greenery to decorate the rough-hewn walls. Clara walked through the door on Martha's arm, since she had no father to give her away, and saw Samuel standing by the fireplace in his best suit. His face transformed by something she'd never seen before. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Rosie stood beside him in the yellow dress she'd worn to meet Clara that first morning, bouncing on her toes with barely contained excitement. The preacher's words washed over Clara like music. She heard them without really hearing, too focused on Samuel's face, on the way he looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever spoken. "Do you, Samuel James Holloway, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Samuel's voice was steady and sure. "With everything I am." "And do you, Clara Marie Bennett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara looked at Samuel, at Rosie, at the cabin that had become her home, and the life she'd never dared to dream was possible. "I do," she said, "with everything I am, and everything I hope to be." "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Texas, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The preacher smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Samuel cupped her face in his hands, those rough, gentle hands she'd come to love, and kissed her. The cabin erupted in cheers and applause. Rosie threw herself at both of them, and Samuel lifted her up so they could share a three-way embrace, laughing and crying, and holding on like they'd never let go. "We're a family now," Rosie said. "A real family." "We always were," Clara replied. "Now it's just official." The celebration lasted well into the evening. Neighbors ate and drank and danced to fiddle music, and Clara found herself passed from embrace to embrace, welcomed into a community she'd thought would never accept her. Late in the night, when the guests had finally gone home, and Rosie had fallen asleep on the rug by the fire, Samuel carried Clara across the threshold of their bedroom. "Welcome home, Mrs. Holloway," Clara laughed. "I've been home for weeks." "Not like this." He set her down gently. "Not as my wife." They stood there in the lamplight, this man and woman who'd found each other through tragedy and chance, and a little girl's stubborn heart. "I love you," Clara said. "I know I said it before, but I want you to hear it again. I love you, Samuel Holloway, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life showing you what that means." "I know." He pulled her close. "I'm going to do the same." Spring came slowly to the Texas hills. Clara watched it unfold with wonder. The first green shoots pushing through the snow, the wildflowers beginning to bloom, the days growing longer and warmer. She'd never experienced spring like this, as something earned rather than expected. In Boston, the seasons had changed without her noticing. Here, every bud and blade of grass felt like a gift. Her chicken business was thriving. What had started as 20 hens had grown to 50, then 75, and she was selling eggs in town every week. The money wasn't much, but it was hers, earned through her own work, her own planning, her own stubborn refusal to be just a rancher's wife. Not that being Samuel's wife was a burden. Far from it. They'd fallen into a rhythm, the three of them. Mornings began with breakfast together, Samuel telling Rosie about the day's work, while Clara reviewed her own plans. Days were full of labor, hard, satisfying work that left her muscles aching and her heart full. Evenings brought dinner and stories and quiet conversations by the fire. Samuel's arm around her shoulders, while Rosie chattered about her chickens and her cat, and the hundreds of other things that filled a child's busy mind. I mean Mama. Rosie still stumbled over the word sometimes, but she was getting better. "Yes, sweetheart." "When will the baby come?" Clara's heart stopped. "What baby?" "Papa said you might have a baby someday. A brother or sister for me." Rosie looked up with hopeful eyes. "Is it someday yet?" Clara and Samuel exchanged glances. They hadn't told anyone, hadn't been sure enough to tell anyone. But Rosie had always been too perceptive for her own good. "How did you know?" Clara asked carefully. "You've been sick in the mornings, and you keep touching your tummy when you think no one's looking." Rosie smiled triumphantly. "I'm very smart, remember?" Samuel laughed, pulling Clara closer. "Yes, sweetheart, you're going to be a big sister." Rosie's shriek of joy could probably be heard in Copper Springs. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and into summer. Clara had expected to be terrified. Childbirth was dangerous, and she'd heard enough horror stories to fill a lifetime. But instead, she felt only anticipation. She was building something new, creating life with the man she loved, expanding the family she'd stumbled into by accident and claimed on purpose. Samuel was worse than she was, hovering constantly, insisting she rest when she wanted to work, bringing her pillows and blankets and cups of tea, until she threatened to throw them all at his head. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she told him firmly. "Women have been doing this for thousands of years." "Not my woman." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his hands on her growing belly. "Not with my child." "Our child," she corrected. "Our child." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I still get to worry." "Fine, but worry from a distance. You're making me nervous." He did not worry from a distance. Clara gave up trying. The baby came in October during the first real cold snap of autumn. Clara had been in the chicken coop when the pain started, sharp and sudden. nothing like the gentle twinges she'd been feeling for weeks. She made it back to the cabin before her legs gave out, and Samuel found her crouched by the door, breathing through contractions that came faster and faster. "It's time," she gasped. Samuel's face went white. "It's too early. You're not supposed to. Tell that to the baby." Another contraction hit, and Clara grabbed his arm. "Get Martha. Get anyone. Go." He went. The hours that followed were the longest of Clara's life. Martha arrived and took charge with brisk efficiency, ordering Samuel out of the bedroom and Rosie to stay with the neighbors. Clara labored through the afternoon and into the evening, the pain building and cresting and building again until she thought she couldn't take any more. "Push," Martha commanded. "One more time. You can do this." Clara pushed, screamed, pushed again, and then suddenly a cry, high and thin and perfect. "It's a boy," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. "A beautiful, healthy boy." Clara held out her arms, and Martha placed the baby against her chest. He was red and wrinkled, and absolutely miraculous, his tiny fingers curling against her skin, his mouth already searching. "Hello," Clara whispered. "Hello, little one. I'm your mama." The door burst open, and Samuel appeared, his face wild with worry. When he saw Clara exhausted but alive with their son in her arms, he made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh or both. "Clara." He crossed the room and knelt beside the bed. "Are you all right? Is he all right?" "We're perfect." She tilted the baby so Samuel could see his face. "Say hello to your son." Samuel reached out with trembling hands and touched the baby's cheek. "He's so small. He'll grow. What should we name him?" Clara thought about her father, whose weaknesses had nearly destroyed her. About Samuel's father, who'd built this ranch with his own hands. About the legacy they were creating together, brick by brick and choice by choice. "James," she said, "after your father. And Thomas," she paused, "after the man who gave us the weapon to save our home." Samuel's eyebrows rose. "You want to name our son after a crane?" "I want to name him after a man who did the right thing when it mattered. There's a difference." Samuel looked at their son, then at Clara, then at their son again. "James Thomas Holloway." He tested the name. "I like it. So do I." Rosie was allowed in the next morning after Clara had slept, and the baby had been washed and swaddled in a blanket Martha had brought. "He's so tiny," Rosie breathed, peering at her brother with wide eyes. "Was I that tiny?" "Tinier, probably," Samuel said. "You were early. Can I hold him?" Clara helped Rosie sit properly on the bed, then placed James in her arms with careful instructions about supporting his head. Rosie held him like he was made of glass, her expression a mixture of wonder and fierce protectiveness. "I'm going to be the best big sister," she announced. "I'm going to teach him everything. How to collect eggs and name chickens and play hide and seek and one thing at a time, sweetheart." Samuel ruffled her hair. "He needs to learn to eat and sleep first." "I can teach him that too." Clara laughed, and the sound filled the cabin. This cabin that had been empty and sad when she'd first arrived, now overflowing with love and noise and life. This was her family, her home, her future, and it had all started with a question on a frozen train platform. "Papa, why is that lady crying? Can we take her home?" The years that followed were not always easy. There were hard winters when the cattle suffered and money grew tight. There were summers when the heat baked the land dry, and Clara's chickens stopped laying. There were moments of fear and doubt and exhaustion when both she and Samuel wondered if they'd made the right choices. But there were also moments of pure, uncomplicated joy. James taking his first steps tottering across the cabin floor into Clara's waiting arms. Rosie learning to read and write her letters growing neater each day. Samuel coming home from a successful cattle drive with money in his pocket and pride in his eyes. And there were quiet moments too. Evenings by the fire with Samuel's arm around her. Early mornings in the chicken coop listening to the hens cluck and chatter. Lazy Sunday afternoons, when the whole family walked out to Rachel's grave beneath the oak tree and left wildflowers on the stone. Clara never felt threatened by Rachel's memory. How could she? Rachel had given Samuel the capacity to love, had created the daughter who'd saved Clara's life with a simple question. Without Rachel, none of this would exist. "Do you think she'd approve?" Clara asked Samuel one Sunday, standing beside the grave with James on her hip. "Of me, I mean. Of us." Samuel was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the headstone. "I think she'd be grateful," he said finally. "Grateful that Rosie has a mother who loves her. Grateful that I'm not alone anymore. Grateful that this place—" He gestured at the ranch, the land, the life they'd built, is full of love instead of grief. "I hope so. I know so." He pulled her close. "Rachel wanted us to be happy, both of us. And we are." Clara leaned into him, watching Rosie chase James through the tall grass, their laughter carrying on the wind. "Yes," she agreed. "We are." 10 years after Clara Bennett stepped off a train in Copper Springs and had her heart broken on a frozen platform, she stood in the doorway of her cabin and watched the sun set over the Texas hills. The ranch had grown. The chicken operation had expanded into a proper business with 3 employees and contracts with stores in 3 different towns. Samuel's cattle herd had doubled, then tripled. They'd added rooms to the cabin, built new barns, hired hands to help with the work. And the family had grown too. Rosie was 15 now, tall and beautiful with her mother's smile and her father's stubborn streak. She was talking about becoming a teacher, about opening a school for ranch children who couldn't make it to town. James was 9, all gangly limbs and boundless energy, following his father around the ranch and begging to learn everything about cattle and horses and the land. And there was little Rachel, named for the woman who'd made all of this possible, who was 5 years old and exactly as precocious as her older sister had been at that age. "Mama," Rachel tugged at Clara's skirt. "When's dinner?" "Soon, sweetheart. Go wash your hands." "But I'm hungry now." "Then go wash your hands now." Rachel sighed dramatically and stomped off toward the pump, her golden curls bouncing with each step. Clara watched her go with a smile. Samuel came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Penny, for your thoughts." "I was thinking about the day we met." "The platform." "Mm-hmm." Clara leaned back against him. "I was so scared, so sure my life was over. And now I know it was just beginning." She turned in his arms to face him. "You saved my life that day, Samuel Holloway. You and Rosie. I never would have survived without you." "You would have survived," Samuel's voice was certain. "You're the strongest person I've ever known. You would have found a way." "Maybe, but I wouldn't have found this." She gestured at the ranch, the children, the life they'd built together. "I wouldn't have found you." Samuel kissed her forehead. "I'm the lucky one. A broken-down widower with a talkative daughter and a ranch that was falling apart. You could have done so much better." "There is no better." Clara pulled him down for a proper kiss. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." From inside the cabin, James's voice rang out. "Pa, Rosie won't let me see the new foal." "Because you'll scare it," Rosie shouted back. "You're too loud." "I am not. R2. Am not." Samuel sighed. "Duty calls." "Go." Clara pushed him gently toward the door. "I'll start dinner." He went, and Clara stood alone in the doorway for a moment longer, watching the last light fade from the sky. She thought about the girl she'd been orphaned, abandoned, desperate. She thought about the train ride west, about the letters from a man who'd promised her a future and delivered only humiliation. She thought about the cold and the fear and the certainty that she was going to die on that platform. And then she thought about Rosie's voice cutting through the darkness. "Papa, why is that lady crying? Can we take her home?" One question, one moment of childish compassion, and everything had changed. Clara smiled and went inside to make dinner for her family. Behind her, the sun set over the Texas hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and red and purple. The land stretched out in all directions, vast and wild and beautiful, full of possibilities for those brave enough to claim them. Clara had been brave. She had claimed her place, and she had built a life worth living. Not because a man had rescued her, but because she had rescued herself. One choice at a time. One day at a time, until the scared girl on the platform had become a woman who feared nothing. Home, she had learned, wasn't a place. It was the people you chose, and who chose you back. It was showing up every day, doing the work, weathering the storms. It was love, imperfect, stubborn, fierce love that refused to let go. Clara Bennett had come to Texas looking for safety. She had found something far better. She had found home.